Well, good morning, everybody. How's it going today? The local time is 8:42 in the morning, and we will begin our program on Craters of the Moon at 9 o'clock local time. A mere 17 minutes away. Had to think about it for a second. Thank you for joining us. Got a few raindrops this morning, but it's supposed to pass. So give me a second. Let me make sure that I've got everything under cover that needs to be under cover. How are we all doing today? Are we functional? Judith is in Skyway, Washington, and Bill from Portland. Hello, Patrick, age 6. Francis is in Germany. Good morning. Abbotsford, BC. Stephen, hello. Cardiff, Bellingham, Wenatchee, Columbus, Belgium, Belfort, Pennsylvania, North Dakota, Mars Hill, North Carolina, exclamation point. Hello, just me from Los Angeles, Kansas City, Susan from Natchez, Mount Angel, Oregon, Martin from the Netherlands, Daryl from Australia, Scotland, Fat Salmon in the house. Gail's from New Leavenworth. Ben from the Netherlands. Nova Scotia. Taro is from Finland. So wonderful to have you with us this morning. Yeah, I see some blue sky over there. This is a little, I just checked the radar. So stuff's coming from Wenatchee. Corey and Max are out climbing again this morning, and they were checking the weather as well. So this shouldn't last too long, I don't think. All right, 5x5. Can I double check there? We got a barking dog. It's so sensitive. Maury Longo, 5x5. D. Spolsky, thank you. Jason, thank you. Oscar. I want to do some thank yous, but I don't know if I want to do it with a bunch of raindrops. Oh, I can do some that shouldn't be too bothered by the rain. I mean, it's just a few drops. It's not down in eastern Washington, for goodness sake. Yeah, let's do some thank yous. So you remember this? I got this and I wasn't sure who I got it from. It just arrived in the mail and I couldn't find a name. Turns out it's Gene. Gene S. over there in Puyallup. And not only did Gene pass along this jewel. What in the flip is this? What kind of flippin' rock is this? Who the S gives me the flippin'? I don't even know where I hate you. F this S. Thank you, Gene. But Gene did his usual. I don't know. This is like the 4th time you've done this, Gene. It seems like. You call up Jeff down at Vinman's. You say, whip up a few things and walk them over to Nick's, would you? So Gene, thank you. So Jeff, owner of Vinman's, came over yesterday after we were done live streaming. Bunch of lemon scones. My personal favorites. What in the hell? Hang on. Sorry, Patrick. Cozy Fort by Steve. Everything's undercover, don't worry. I just want to... want to talk to you. I just want to talk to you. I know iPhones are weatherproof or whatever, but I feel bad if this thing is getting socked. Surprise, surprise, surprise. So, Gene, thank you for the, where's the camera on this thing? Lemon scones and pain du chocolat. That's French. Oh, and there's some bear claws in there too, Gene. This episode of Nick from Home brought to you by Vinman's Bakery, downtown Ellensburg. You gotta love it. Got some very nice letters. From Linwood, Washington. I didn't know these kinds of cards existed. Craig and Ann, Sarah and Tim and Lewis, thank you for the card. This is from North Highlands, California. Even on the even on the back of the envelope. And especially love the Native American geology program with Randy and the fantastic Specsman. I agree with you. I agree with you, Mrs. Relaya. Mrs. Relaya. She says it's pronounced like reliable, but don't do the bull. Don't do the bull. Thank you for spelling it out for me. I need help like that. Oh, we're maybe done with the rain. Merle in Plainsville, Kansas. Thank you for the very kind letter, Merle. Oh, we got a box. Ken delivered a box yesterday. Box from Hugh and Grace in Puyallup. Do you know Gene? And very nice letter, including a map of where your house is. You can see Mount Rainier from your house. A little vial of Mount St. Helens ash. Thank you. A face mask for Liz. She has already modeled it for us last night when we were playing cards. Two face masks for me. I should probably put one on. I'm swimming in face masks. In Washington State, we are all wearing face masks in public. Oh, yeah. Hey, Gene and Hugh and Grace. I don't know. Did you make these? But this is. I'm not kidding now. This is easily the best fit I've had so far with one of these masks. So thank you. This might be my go-to. And I think it was Hugh did a pencil sketch of Rainier from his front porch or down the street, but lives in Puyallup and can see that beautiful Tahoma, Mount Tacoma, according to Bailey Willis, Mount Rainier, according to others. Whatever we call it, it's a beautiful mountain, for sure. And last but not least, and I promise these are under shelter here, got a cylinder in the mail a few days ago from Oscar. And Oscar's in San Diego, California. And Oscar, I want to thank you for your amazing gift. Let me show everybody what was in the cylinder. I'll do it quickly. I don't want to get them. Oscar has all these amazing photos that he printed out of various sizes from craters of the moon. And I mean, they are, you know, office worthy, like decorating our classrooms. I'll show you one more, but let me give you the big kahuna and then I'll get it. We're about done with the raindrops here. Craters of the frickin' moon. Thank you so much, Oscar. I will use these for years. For teaching and also decoration. This was the week that was. We did a little field trip to the campus of Central Washington University and talked about being a geology major there. We talked about a geologist from the olden days, Bailey Willis. These are all available on YouTube to watch as a replay if you're unfamiliar with that. It's not just live, you can watch them after the fact. Oregon Geology ? That was kind of a circus, but fun. Cinder cone volcanoes was yesterday, and we'll use a little bit of what we did yesterday morning for our craters of the moon discussion this morning. And there is no next week. I've already said a few times that taking a break. We've done 75 of these since mid-March, and we will be doing more in some form because we have built a really an amazing community here. But I don't want to pin myself down. I need to take a break, number one, and I also just need to think about how I want to continue with these live streams. But we will be doing more, almost certainly this summer in some form, but I'm not sure yet what that means. Hope you understand. Okay, I got 4 minutes according to my watch. Let me say hi to a few more folks and make sure we're in good shape. Yeah, blue sky right there. I think we're good. Don't even think I need these for now. Who else can we say hi to? We got any kids here this morning? And others as well. Poppy from New Jersey, South Wales. Good morning. Red Deer, Alberta. Nancy from Missoula. Monroe, Washington. Evelyn, age 8. Good morning, Evelyn. Ottawa, Canada. That's Frank. Frank's checking in from Ottawa. Andrew from Bellingham. Charlie from Iowa. No, Charlie from Goldendale, home of the Cinder Cones. Alabama. Alaska. Jamie and Heather from Boulder. Force the Cat. Knoxville. Below Queen Anne Hill, home of J. Harlan Bretsch for 1 year before he pissed everybody off and left. The teenagers are here. Michael from Cincinnati. Brian from Lubbock, Texas. Todd is clapping. London, Biz Liz. Biz Nasty. Alan's from Alaska. Sitka, Alaska to be precise. Pretty quiet morning here. Nobody's really out and about. I think that's Barbara going to play the organ down at the church. Christine from California. Allison from Pomeroy. Tim from Washougal. South Carolina, Charleston, what a beautiful city that is. Homer, Alaska. We got a bunch of Alaska folks now. That's nice. Maybe you've always been here, but maybe I'm just noticing. Should every sentence have the word maybe in it? That's a good question. Maybe. Okay. I got 2 minutes. I'm so glad that you're with us this morning. Give me a second to collect my thoughts, and we will begin our program on craters of the moon. Well, a pleasant good morning to you all. Welcome to the program. This is a backyard and a house in Ellensburg, Washington. USA, and my name is Nick Zentner. I teach at the college over there, just a few blocks away. Central Washington University is the name of the school. And I'm so glad that you've tuned in this morning. We are going to be talking about southern Idaho and a particular place that's now a national monument called Craters of the Moon National Monument. It was a national monument starting in the 1920s, but I was shocked that much of that land preservation has expanded in recent years. It's been more than 30 years since I lived in Pocatello, and I was a graduate student there at Idaho State University. And I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt, which is not my normal deal, but if we go to Craters of the Moon, which we are doing this morning, in the Cozy Fort with a bunch of photos, a bunch of video clips, we also need to be in the mind of the Big Island of Hawaii. And so we will do a little bit with the Big Island of Hawaii as well, because there's wonderful parallels. And this last show of the series, the Nick from Home series, is really kind of unfinished business. This is a gift that I got a while back. And this Craters of the Moon thing has been an inside joke with us. We've had many running jokes through since mid-March when we started this pandemic series. And Craters of the Moon was one of the running jokes, and some folks would even in the live chat try to, trick me and ask a normal question, and then they'd be shifting to Craters of the Moon. Ha, ha, ha. Okay, it has been fun. The reason it's an inside joke is I mentioned pretty early on back in March when we were doing some kind of live Q&A, I always get asked about Craters of the Moon. I live in Ellensburg, Washington. I don't even live on this map. And yet a lot of people in Central Washington, I really don't care what the topic is when I'm talking to a group. There's a question and answer session, and I mean, it's almost like I'm waiting for the Craters of the Moon question, not as a joke, but like seriously. So I've always been impressed by that. Number one, because you really have to invest some time to get out there. It's not on the way to anywhere, really. And yet it is a special place. Personally, I haven't been there in more than 30 years, but I think I need to go since I got kind of really enjoyed kind of getting up to speed on what's going on with Craters of the Moon. So that is the plan. But what I have to offer you this morning is not only talking about some of the features within the park, which we'll really be doing mostly within the Cozy Fort. I think what I can offer that maybe you won't get other places with a discussion of this place is the regional context. And this map is of the eastern Snake River Plain. And if you've been a fan of the series here, you might remember that I did a master's thesis at Idaho State, and my project, my master's thesis, which was 2 full summers of being pretty much by myself in the desert making maps, was up here at the southern tip of the Beaverhead Mountains, a place called Leidy Hot Springs, really in the middle of nowhere. Didn't see people for days. But this is a very flat area, the Snake River Plain. It's truly a plain, it's flat, and those of you that know this country, you know how flat it is. But the context is important here to explain the volcanism at Craters of the Moon. These are mountain ranges, and these are mountain ranges. And you can see, I hope right off the bat, that it's no accident that these mountain ranges kind of line up, but they're interrupted by this Snake River Plain. So my master's thesis was trying to contribute to the discussion of basically who's younger. Were these ranges connected once upon a time? This is the Basin and Range Province. Basin, Range, Basin, Range. We'll talk more about it. Got more raindrops. Wow, weird. So did the ranges continue and then this Snake River Plain somehow develop with the passing Yellowstone hotspot? Yellowstone National Park is here. Grand Teton National Park is here. That's the Teton Fault. Or vice versa. Was the Snake River Plain established firmly with the Yellowstone hotspot story, and then somehow these ranges popped up kind of coincidentally on both sides of the plain? The answer is both. I never did kind of get what I was hoping for, which was a set of normal faults that showed that this is older than this or this is older than this. Instead, I showed them both kind of forming simultaneously, coeval. I didn't even know that word until my advisor taught it to me. This is a coeval development, E-V-A-L, coeval. In other words, they're both established roughly at the same time. So it's an exciting place, and you'll see a couple of maps where there's this incredible, maybe if you're on Google Maps right now, look at the Snake River Plain and how much of an obvious kind of scar it is. Like it's just mountainous throughout this whole scene. And then here's this really weird volcanic swamp, the Snake River Plain. And to give you a feel for scale, so I would drive from Pocatello each time I was ready to go out to the field. It took me 2 hours. It took me 2 hours to drive to IF, Idaho Falls, and then cross the Snake River Plain. So this is a vast area, and Craters of the Moon National Park is here. National Monument is here. So why is that important? Well, let's cut right to it. There's an incredible list of volcanic features at Craters of the Moon. He goes to the whiteboard. Over here. I mean, you get your bang for your buck at Craters of the Moon. You're not driving all the way out there to look at a couple lava flows and then you jump back in the car and you go someplace else. In a relatively small area, this is the variety. This is the menu, the volcanic menu. And notice the ages here. Shockingly young. Nothing's younger than 2,000 years old. But compared to the cinder cones we were talking about yesterday, this is yesterday. So, a picture is worth 1,000 words. We'll save some details until we get into the cozy fort and look at some slides and some video clips. But I still, before we go in the cozy fort, I would like to give you a little bit more context about why is all this stuff happening at this time frame here. Like, is this related to Yellowstone? That's the obvious question, isn't it? I heard Yellowstone's a volcano. Yes, it is. It's a supervolcano. Supervolcanoes have the stiffest of all magmas, rhyolites, making a dome. And then eventually there's a colossal explosion, mind-blowing explosion that's way bigger than any volcanic eruption that we have seen in recorded history, essentially. And a caldera is left. Well, those kinds of calderas we've already discussed, and they are beneath the Snake River Plain. You'll see some maps. And those buried supervolcano calderas created by the Yellowstone hotspot are roughly 10 million years old here, and 4 million years old here, and less than 2 million years old up in the Yellowstone area. But what was the age of our Craters of the Moon stuff? I'm saying 10 million, 4 million, less than 2 million. And yet we have to go way back here and we have to get stuff that's younger than 15,000? Like younger than the Ice Age? So just spatially, just geographically, it doesn't make sense, does it? That this smorgasbord of volcanic features in Craters of the Moon is because the Yellowstone hotspot is right beneath. And we are really not going to say that this morning. Yes, the Yellowstone hotspot's over here. Yes, there's kind of a broad regional head to that mantle plume. And I guess if you really want to, we could get a little bit of that heat over towards Craters of the Moon. But instead, my main message to you this morning, before we go in the cozy fort, is that the Craters of the Moon is a basin and range province experience. The basin and range. So you maybe didn't expect that tuning in. I mean, we're going to Hawaii and doing all sorts of other things, but I really want to spend a few minutes talking about the basin and range extensional province that is in Idaho for sure, but more famously in Nevada and western Utah and southern Arizona and getting down into Mexico and other places as well. So what do we know about the basin and range? What was I taught at the University of Wisconsin before I moved out here in 1986 about the basin and range? Here's what I was taught. He goes to the other whiteboard. Daniel Muhs, M-U-H-S, Physical Geography in Science Hall in Madison, 1982 probably, taught us this And this was the classic way to discuss the Basin and Range Province in the early 1980s. So I had my little Meade spiral notebook and I copied down, this explains this range basin pattern that's not just here south of Pocatello, but going all the way down to Vegas and beyond. You know about the Basin Range, I think, right? If you've looked at a map of the entire state of Nevada, it's nothing but this. And it takes you an hour to go through a basin, and then an hour to go up and over a range, etc. Like if you drive from Salt Lake to Reno, it's a long drive, number one. Is that Interstate 80 or is that 70? It's 80, isn't it? Salt Lake to Reno? And you're just, boy, it's a lonely drive, and it's an hour up, an hour down, an hour up, an hour down. So this was the message to me as an undergraduate, learning about uplifted blocks and down-dropped blocks with German labels. The Horstengraben. The Horstengraben. You're driving over a horst, and then you go through a graben. Terrible accent. And the point is, with grabens, you're forming the basins in the Basin and Range Province. You're forming the basins that Pocatello sits in, that Arco, Idaho sits in, etc. This is what I was taught. By normal faults, earthquakes, graben simply dropping and horsts simply lifting. And this is all in response to, can I do it? Crustal extension. By pulling the crust open like an accordion, you are thinning the crust, you are extending the crust, and you are developing this Horstengraben pattern. Okay, embarrassing moment number one. I have a long list of embarrassing moments, including wearing this shirt right now. But when I moved to Pocatello, within a month we were out in the field. That school was and continues to be amazing for many reasons, including just the sheer number of hours that you're out there in the field. There's no substitute for being in the field. And so we were brought, I forget which valley it was, maybe over here. We pull out, we had all these school Suburbans back in the 80s, we got the little ISU logo on it. We all pull our caravan off to the side. There's nobody in the valley, just a bunch of hay fields. And so, it's the new guys, and some of the older guys and gals who've been around a few years. Like it's the whole graduate department, basically. And Paul Link, God bless him, Paul Link, who was responsible for me coming there because he's a former Badger guy as well. Paul Link said, hey, new guy, me, Ned, Hey, so why is this valley here? And why is this range? This is the Basin Range. How does it form? So in my little shaky voice, I'm telling the group, all these people who've been here already a couple of years, well, there's the Horst, and there's, I can't remember the other one, and then the lift, and so Paul said, okay, you're embarrassing yourself. So is there a fault over on this side of the valley? Yes, sir. Is there a fault on this side of the valley? Yes, sir. He says, well, let's go take a look. So we drive over to this range front, and we don't find a fault. You can find a fault in the desert by finding a line of trees, springs. It's green. It's a little strip of green vegetation, basically, telling you there's a fault. There's also maybe a fault scarp. We didn't find a fault on that side, but we did find a fault on the other side. And Paul said, hey, can you tell this greenhorn what's up? That the Horstengraben model doesn't actually work out here in many of these basins and ranges? And this was like, what? It was in my notebook. The guy just taught it to me in Wisconsin like 3 years ago. So we'll tell this guy about the half-graben model. Would you please? Would somebody please help this kid out? And it was explained to me that with many of the basins in the Basin and Range Province, there's actually one normal fault per basin, not two. The red lines are normal faults. And instead of kind of doink, 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 instead of these vertical ups and downs, as the textbooks illustrated all through the 1960s and 70s at least, instead, these blocks are huge dominoes. These mountain ranges are these huge dominoes that slowly tip over, like 3 dominoes all kind of falling in slow motion. Over the course of millions of years, of course, big normal fault earthquakes every time you release a little bit of that pent-up stress. But you still get a basin and range pattern with half the faults and inclined layers that are bedrock layers in the ranges instead of these horizontal layers. So I'm scribbling furiously and like going back and spitting on my Mead notebook from 3 years earlier. I made that part up. But the half-graben model is more accurate. We'll look at a couple of animations. Now, am I off on a tangent? I am not. Here's the biggest message of this morning. You're listening to my talk on craters of the moon. It's maybe different than what somebody else would say. My message is, maybe you're already ahead of me now, this is a volcanic swamp. It is perfectly flat. But the normal faults in the half-graben model that exist down here and the normal faults in the half-graben model that exist up here continue across the plain. Active normal faults in response to crustal extension, opening up an accordion, forming these amazing mountains and valleys. But there is structural evidence that those normal faults continue through this young area, and the magmas, the very young magmas between, 15,000 and 2,000 years ago, are taking advantage of those structures, those faults that continue across, and those are the pathways to the surface of these very young magmas. You feeling me? You picking up what I'm laying down? I'm going to say it one more time real quick and then we're moving on. It's not an accident we have the Arco Rift and the Great Rift and King's Bowl Rift and Hell's Half Acre. It's no accident we have these very fresh lavas just in certain places on the Snake River Plain. There's a reason that those young little blips of basalt and rhyolite, it's bimodal volcanism, by the way, no andesite, no middle of the road, it's all or nothing. You either have Big Southern Butte made out of the stiffest of all possible lavas that act like toothpaste when they come out of the ground, Big Southern Butte on the Arco Rift, or you have mostly basaltic material along the Great Rift and King's Bowl and a few other places I can't remember. Hell's Half Acre is totally basalt. They're coming up along these normal faults. The only thing that's a little unclear to me is why we haven't had offset on these, if these truly are normal faults, and now I'm starting to doubt myself as I say this, are these more just fractures as opposed to actual normal faults? If these are truly normal faults that extend through the Snake River Plain and they have been active, the normal faults have been active for even 1,000,000 years, why wouldn't we have a little bit of basin and range, like the Snake River Plain actually offset a little bit topographically? We really don't. This is like driving across a billiard table. It's still pretty flat. But you hear my main point, and I hope that works for you. So, last time we'll look at this whiteboard. If you know some of these features but not others, the Cozy Fort's going to help us. But I'm saying all of this successfully got to the surface at Craters of the Moon because of structural weakness in certain locations along the trace in the path of the Snake River Plain. Okay, no raindrops, feeling good. What else do I have here? Well, I'll just show you, since we kind of laid that out. That was the big moment. I don't know how you feel. You ready to cry now? Look at these handcrafted diagrams from a 1989 thesis. So here's little Nicky Zentner with his whatever. I can't remember what machine you use to make these. You're like punching out letters. What, Diazo machine? Is that a thing? Old timers, you remember? I just remember it was like laying down this like Scotch tapey kind of stuff with these letters. But I was using some geophysical evidence I was able to find. This is the late 1980s now, and here's the Snake River Plain, and here's these younger magmas coming to the surface, and some of these older like Permian limestones, like really old from the ranges that are getting interrupted by that younger lava. What else? Oh, here. I don't remember if I drew these or I just ripped them off of somebody and gave them credit. Oh, Stuart, not flipping you off. Kind of showing the half-graben model as the more accurate way to visualize. Yeah, that's pretty good. Big old dominoes. Boy, what a shock to this. Oh, here, yeah. So here's the Eastern Snake River Plain getting, interrupting the basin and range. You're like, okay, I guess I get it. But then let's zoom out, man. Look at how, look at that. Look at all those normal faults. Look at the extent of this thing. And I'm sure there's other places where that basin and range pattern is interrupted, but at least in the Northwest, nowhere close to the ESRP. ESRP. Okay, detour for just a second. Those 3 years at Pocatello were very important to me, maybe the most important of my career. And I don't know if you've read a thesis before, but there's always kind of a sappy little acknowledgement section. And I think I want to read a little bit of this to you, if you don't mind. It's my live stream. I guess I can do what I want. Dr. David Rogers, my advisor, has been with me every step of the way, not only with this thesis, but with everything I've done during the last 3 years. I'm writing this in 1989. I couldn't have asked for an advisor more suited to my personality. He has managed to get me enthused about structural geology, and as a result, I feel good about my learning and teaching abilities. He has also taught me how to think. Without Dave's valuable input, I'd still be in the back of the room pretending to be in the discussion, which is true. Also on my committee, Dr. Bill Hackett and Dr. Falma Moy have been very helpful with this study. Bill giving advice ranging from petrology of the Eastern Snake River Plain to the aperture of a camera, back in the days when you didn't have a digital camera. Falma has been loyal enough to visit my field area numerous times, and her insight out there was always fresh. Dr. Paul Link, who's about to retire, by the way, was not involved directly with the thesis, but his contributions to my stay here has been numerous. So, major shout out to ISU Geology and those folks in particular for can't thank you enough. All right, so we're going to look in the Cozy Fort at some cinders like we did yesterday. I forgot I had these. This was my way I was going to show you the difference between Horst and Graben and half Graben. So Special K. This episode, Nick from Home, brought to you by Special K. And Special K, and then the Graben is going to be Cheerios. So, 20 million years ago when the Basin and Range Province didn't exist anywhere, this is a younger than 20 million year old story developing these normal faults, and that's a whole nother discussion. So we're in Nevada or southern Idaho, and we don't have, pretend those are down. And so the old model that I learned, the Horst and Graben, is simply just relaxing my hands, just holding my hand, relaxing my hands and having the Graben drop each time there was a normal fault earthquake and we had basin, range basin. Now you know what we're doing? I'm still going to relax my hands. I'm still going to pull the crust apart. I'm going to thin the crust by a half. Basin and Range Province has half the thickness of its crust compared to other places in North America. But as I thin the crust, I'm doing this. Tilted dominoes. Half the faults. Not a normal fault on each range front, but each basin only has one normal fault on it. Sun coming out for that. Okay, 9:30-ish. Sean Wilsey teaches at the community college in Twin Falls, Idaho. Met him on a field trip a few summers ago. Good guy, and he's written not really a roadside geology book, but one of these geology underfoot in southern Idaho books with a series of vignettes, basically. Beautifully illustrated by Sean. Many of his children and wife and family, himself, kind of in many of these little vignettes. And he's got little sections on Craters of the Moon, Big Southern Butte, I'm not flipping you off, Kings Bowl, North Menon Butte, we'll talk about Menon Butte a little bit. So he knows southern Idaho very, very well, and a very readable book. I encourage you if you don't know about it. I think it came out recently, 2017. Geology Underfoot in Southern Idaho, Sean Wilsey. Okay, we're going to the Cozy Fort by Steve. Evelyn, we're going to be in here a while now. Do you have enough cereal? You need to run to the kitchen quick, get a little bit more cereal? You comfortable? Patrick? Don't freelance. Follow the numbers that Steve has laid out for you, please. 3 goes into 3. If you're new to us, you're nervous right now. Don't be nervous. We got a lot of people watching. That's good. I'm so glad. Craters of the Moon deserves this attention. Hello. So like we did last time, we're going to be in here a while, number one. And like last time, I'm going to get rid of the live stream and I'm going to go to a slideshow first, and then we'll look at some YouTube clips. Of course, we have to start, as we have lately, with Pierre. And Pierre's inviting us to make sure we visit Craters of the Moon. And I showed most of this yesterday. We'll stick with it. Pierre, you spent some time on this. It's always fun to watch your creations. PierreGustafson.com if you're looking for calligraphy or other custom-made graphics. Pierre, forgive me if I'm not marketing you correctly here, but Pierre has joined us in the live chats and like many have wanted to offer something in return, and this is Pierre's way of returning the favor. Of course, I'm very grateful to everyone who's chipping in their own very special way. Okay, so yes, we're going to Craters of the Moon, National Monument. Don't be worried, we're going there. But I think we need to go to Hawaii first to really understand what we have. So that's where I bought the shirt. This is Steve Lundblad, a good friend of mine who I taught with in Ellensburg for almost a decade, and he loved the Big Island so much that he moved there with his wife Nancy, and he's been the chair of the University of Hawaii Hilo Geology Department in the last few years. So this is Tom Foster and I flying over to the Big Island of Hawaii and shooting some video. And Steve went out and hung out with us and showed us where to go. So, Steve Lundblad, I salute you. I know you've been watching many of these. Nobody better than Steve. So when we were teaching together at Central, we would take Central kids right before Christmas for about 10 days after final exams. and before Christmas. And these are Central Washington University students. We did this 3 different times in the late 90s. And that's where I really got interested in Hawaiian geology. Again, there's no substitute for being there in the flesh. Don Swanson, very famous geologist, would spend a day with us each of those 3 trips, as he does with many, I think still does, possibly, devotes his time as a USGS geologist to showing geology students the details in his research. So those were memorable trips, and really important, I think, when you go to a place like Craters of the Moon to realize that these kinds of things do exist in their modern form. We don't have to go back 2,000 years. We can go to this afternoon. This is Angie Diefenbach, a student at the time, now one of the main geologists at the Cascade Volcano Observatory. Shout out to Angie Diefenbach. We would hike out there in the middle of the night to see some action on the Pali, the Helena Pali, and the eruption from Pu'u'o down to the water. Here's some old clips. Old clips. Night vision.
Oh, very nice.
Thank you, Jason.
Nicely done, Jason. Wow, can you make another one do that?
So total amateur hour here, but many of you know the experience. If you've been to the Big Island and you have hoofed it out to an active flow, there's nothing like it. Okay, we've got a hole. You see the glob that's on my hammer? No, you don't, because I didn't get it. I'm going in. Sam, cover me. I'm going in.
Why? Oh, cool.
Wow. So we've got some pele's here, and we have bright orange turning to black. We're developing a rock as we speak, and you hear helicopters behind you. Man, I thought I was going to burn my face off there. You hear that crackling?
It's still too hot to touch, Nick.
Lundblad knew I was kind of a moron. I was probably going to pick that up. Here's Steve.
Okay, so Nick took this piece of lava out about 3 minutes ago, and it's been dark colored ever since. We're going to pour a little water on it and see how hot we think it still is.
Hot dog.
So it was 1,200 degrees centigrade when it was there inside the flow, and I don't know how hot it is now, but it's still hot.
How about one more? Beautiful. Steve Lundblad, you know Pele personally. Have you met Pele at a cocktail party?
I think we've met Pele today.
Yes, oh, that's excellent. Steve's a good guy. Okay, from yesterday, we were focusing exclusively on cinder cone volcanoes and some fluid lavas that are emerging from, I guess, from the base or maybe the flank of the cinder cones. Just reminding you that there's some of that at Craters of the Moon as well. We're still in Central Oregon now, just trying to remind you of where we were yesterday, and we didn't really see much of a pattern to these cinder cones, although I was speculating the same thing yesterday, that normal faults could be controlling many of these very young structures, like Lava Butte south of Bend, like Cinder Cone in Lassen Park in Northern California, made out of cinders. These are just the cinder cones, but of course, if that's all we had at Craters of the Moon, if that's all we had, just a bunch of cinder cones, that'd still be pretty cool. But you saw the list on the whiteboard, right? We've got way more than just cinder cones coming up in a minute. Right, so from yesterday, we know it's basaltic material exclusively. Tons of scoria and and pahoehoe in Craters of the Moon. Now nearby, on another one of these rifts, is Menon Buttes, called a tough cone. So in this case, we have young magmas interacting with groundwater. So tough cones are similar to cinder cones, similar to spatter cones in some ways. It's basaltic, but there's a specific morphology and a specific set of deposits that tell us water plays a large role here. To my knowledge, please correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, the Snake River Plain aquifer is not a major player at Craters of the Moon. Spatter cones I mentioned yesterday. I did a quick trip down to the Galapagos in the early 90s. We didn't have any money, by the way, at the time, so I had to hook on with a place called Travel Learn, which was doing some custom field trips basically for people with a bunch of money. And the gimmick of their travel company was you'd have a college professor with them. Well, I'd never been to Galapagos before. So I was kind of half apologizing the whole 2 weeks we were down there, but it was a tremendous experience. Spatter cones, different yet, where you truly have globs, big old globs of orange magma flying out. So much bigger clasts and more fluid clasts than the cinder cones. We'll have Martin show us a little video of that in a second. Now, from the master's thesis, there we go. You saw it on the chalkboard. Here it is in a different way. And if you look at these mountains, look at the basin and range. So can you get your bearings here? I took a little airplane ride with a friend, John Blakely. And I suppose we're up over Twin Falls, and you are looking northeast up the guts of the Snake River Plain. That's Big Southern Butte right there. Boy, what's with this glare? A very dirty slide, but you see how those basins and the ranges just kind of slowly disappear into this swamp, and then here they come up on the other side. I swear to you, this is not just a reversed image. So the intersection of these basins and ranges and the normal faults that control them, the half-graben thing, continue through the Snake River Plain, the biggest message of today. But I'm not kidding. That Snake River Plain, this is in winter, obviously, incredibly flat. But there are these, I would call them more than pimples. This is Big Southern Butte, a huge landmark, even Oregon Trail days and earlier than that, of course. We have Native American history on this plain going back more than 10,000 years. This is made out of rhyolite, and it didn't come up just anywhere. It came up along one of those rifts. Back to an old school map of the Snake River Plain and the location, the original location of Craters of the Moon, and then the expanded version of the protected land now. Well, our buddy from days of yore, Israel Russell, did his incredible field work here in central Washington, and then the next season, 1901, he was over at Crater of the Moon. Many of you corrected me. I didn't think he had gotten over to Craters of the Moon, but you're right, he did. And he didn't call it Craters of the Moon. What do you call it? Cinder Buttes, I think. I couldn't find his original report, but I'm sure it's online somewhere. So he was the first guy to really carefully map and observe Cinder Buttes, now known as Craters of the Moon. So back in those days, of course, it's a hazard for travel. How do we get around this incredibly young volcanic area now known as Craters of the Moon? Look at those spatter cones. It's just like the Galapagos picture I showed you. Different than cinders, right? Somebody honked at you to say hi. Spatter cones. These are photos from Craters of the Moon. I ripped it right off the park website. Kind of in the early part of the 20th century, I guess we can presume that, can't we? Yeah. You may be aware that 50 years ago, 1969 to be precise, the astronauts did some training before their Apollo missions. And since then, in the 1970s, Mel Kuntz in particular, but Lisa Morgan and others, can't think of some, Maldi maybe? I'm not confident of that name, sorry, but this is kind of the stuff I was working with, just reading previous work, and you can see, this is Mel now, Mel Kuntz, USGS. Just remember sitting with him having a ham sandwich one time, and he was talking about the USGS picks all these colors I don't like. It's all pastels and stuff. I work so hard on these geologic maps, and they pick up these ugly colors. That's all I remember. But he's an amazing mapper, and he had these riffs laid out that I kind of showed you just on the chalkboard. Okay, just a little bit of personal history, if you don't mind. So I drove out from Wisconsin, never been to Pocatello before. My parents bought me my first car after graduating from college in 1986. This cost $6,000, no radio, no air, no floor mats even. And the feeling of freedom and independence and having everything you own in a little car like this, I think many of you can relate to this. This is stopping for a break at Jackson Hole. And then after getting settled in Pocatello and meeting a few people and starting in the program and getting embarrassed about the Horst and Graben thing, that was a very quick transition into massive amounts of learning. And I still remember talking to Walt Snyder at Boise State at the time, Claude Spinoza, was that his name? Spence Wood. There was a joint graduate program between ISU and BSU, Boise State University at the time. And I think it was Walt. Oh, I can't remember now. Somebody I was talking about, wow, you know, you're still doing so much great stuff. He said, this is nothing. When I was in grad school, those were my glory days. I was doing nothing but eating and sleeping and learning. And I always remember him saying that. Like, wow, so this is the time right now. I'm a graduate. It's not going to get any more pure than this. And it's kind of true. You get into families and other obligations with your job, and that kind of concentrated learning, just hour by hour, you're just soaking up all this crazy stuff in the field. And by reading, it's amazing. And I guess I'll just say that when your kids leave house and you're in your 50s, you can kind of get back to that in a more concentrated way. So this was Idaho. This is the geology building as it looked in 1986. 1980s hairstyles there. And I mentioned Dave Rogers, hero of mine, still there, Idaho State, but I owe a lot to Dave, for sure. That's an understatement. And Bill Hackett, who taught a volcanology class, and we went out to craters, we went out to Kings Bowl, we went out to, this is in Yellowstone, we did 3 weekend trips there, learned a lot from volcanology professor Bill Hackett. And there's Walt Snyder, actually, now that I mention it, in the yellow hat, the white hat in the middle of the road. Have you been out to the Basin and Range? It's remote country. We're not on the Snake River Plain now. We're south of the Snake River Plain. You can sit in the middle of the highway on a Saturday afternoon. You're not going to see anybody. And there's a normal fault way there in the distance behind Walt's hat at the range-bounding fault. But that's the scale of this Basin and Range thing that exists both north and south of the Snake River Plain. So Idaho, I mean, I just talk nonstop about Washington geology, but I mean, Idaho's got a lot going on, man. And many of you know that. And okay, all right, okay. My parents came out each summer. They were school teachers, so visiting with them was a blast. And they had tons of questions about what my new life was like out there. You want to find a good place to eat? Pocatello, old school, Italian joint, Buddy's. We always go. We'll be there on Wednesday night. We'll drop into Buddy's. So back to the geology. So here's our incredible Snake River Plain. You see the circles there, which are the buried rhyolitic supervolcano explosive structures. And craters of the moon, and all the basalt that's younger sits on top, has buried, completely buried with a kilometer thick worth of basalt, burying those calderas. And here's a nice cross-section from somebody. Can't read it backwards in the upper right. But this is what I'd like you to visualize for those structures. Remember our normal faults? Let's call them normal faults. Those normal faults that are controlling some of the young magmas to come to the surface. And look at the variety. The shield volcanoes, the rhyolitic domes, the cinder cones, the spatter cones, the lava tubes, the ice cave, all that stuff is because of those very concentrated structural weakness zones, like this. So I don't know if this is part of Great Rift or not, probably is. But this is not a strike slip fault. This is not like the San Andreas. This is just simply one of those basin and range faults that's continuing for 2-hour drive across this flat eastern Snake River Plain. Okay, finally to Craters of the Moon. I'll let the photos speak for themselves. Craters of the Moon, National Monument. Look at this. Do you see why I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt? It's like going to Hawaii on the cheap. You don't have to buy plane tickets. The only thing missing is orange lava, but otherwise, it's like being on Kilauea. I think this is Saber's photo. Shout out Saber. Watching on his phone right now outside the Ellensburg Public Library, perhaps. I don't know. Spatter Cone, what do you think? I'm not sure. Pahoehoe, we'll look at video in just a second. This is all from Craters of the Moon now. We're finally done skipping around. Families, you know, tons of families walking. And speaking of families, just a special shout out to Evelyn, age 8, who's been with us, I think, every show. Evelyn, thank you for watching so regularly. I hope that you continue thinking about science. And Patrick, age 6, I don't think you've missed a show either, Patrick. I love you both very much. Okay. As usual, I've got some YouTube clips suggested. Let's go back to Hawaii if you don't mind. I think you know why we're doing that. And why not thank Tom Foster one more time? And we made this program when we flew over there and stayed with Lundblad. Aloha, young people. The Rainshadow effect on the Big Island of Hawaii. Rainshadows are dry areas on the back sides of mountains. The downwind side of a mountain, the mountain creates a shadow of dryness. We've got that here on the Big Island. It's the most famous place to study this effect. You can go wet side to dry side of this island in a 60-mile drive and go from Hilo side, which is more than 120 inches of annual precipitation, that's more than 10 feet, by the way, of rain per year, up and over the Saddle Road to the Kona side of the island, which has less than 10 inches of rain a year. That's quite a transition. What is going on here? Here in the Pacific Northwest, we've got the same effect. Yeah, Rainshadow. Western Washington is famous comparing Hawaii with Washington. There's a strikingly different landscape on the deposits from the Ice Age to unexpectedly slide. Tom Foster and I stayed at Lundblad's house, and then one of their family friends came over and had a ukulele. A great help to geologists. So I'll just show you how we finished this up. We kind of Cascades have cast a rain shadow on Washington's channeled scablands. Our desert landscape that has yielded so many clues about the Ice Age floods, the Columbia River basalts, and other wonders of our geologic past, just like back in Hawaii. It's all out here to see. Oceans, rocks, and lava, the scenery. Right here for you and me. 2-minute geology. That was a good memory. We recorded that in our little bedroom. The little mother-in-law bedroom in Lundblad's house. I saw this. Somebody sent this last night. Hold it. Hold it. Where is that? Sorry. Pahoehoe and you're familiar with those terms? This is one of the best short videos I've seen with great footage and an understated approach.
One of the most awesome displays of the tremendous energy inside our planet is produced by an active lava flow. Lava flows are produced when magma reaches the surface without fragmenting into pyroclastic material. But how fast it moves, what it looks like, and whether or not you can poke a stick in it, well, that depends on what kind of lava we're talking about. The most familiar types of lava flows have been given the Hawaiian or Polynesian names Pahoehoe and A'a. When low-viscosity lava flows relatively slowly, it will form a Pahoehoe type lava flow.
We're in Hawaii,
These
obviously.
have smooth or hummocky or billowy or ropey type surfaces. But their appearance can vary greatly. That's clear from the many other creative terms that have been used to describe their surfaces, including corded, festooned, filamented, shelly, slabby, coiled, blistered, shark skin, and elephant hide.
I love this guy.
Pahoehoe flows commonly advance through lobes and fingers, like the movement of a giant amoeba. The very ends of Pahoehoe flows can even take on some surprising, almost humanoid shapes. When lava is exposed, the surface cools quickly, hardens, and deforms brittly, leading to a cracking or popping sound. Just under this brittle surface, though, is a thin layer that deforms plastically and stretches, giving the inflating balloon-type appearance, while inside, the hot lava remains fluid.
We're going to stick with it till it gets to
The
A'a.
common ropey pattern occurs when the thin crust slows or becomes stuck, and the lava underneath continues moving forward, folding and wrinkling the crust. A'a flows occur when lava is more viscous or flows faster. A'a flows have surfaces described as rough, blocky, spiny, and rubbly. They advance rather like a bulldozer tread. Rubbly clinker forms and is carried along at the top and then tumbles down the front of the flow where it's overridden. The core of the flow, though, remains molten. As a result,
I don't know anything about that guy.
solidified
He's
A'a flows
this
have
is
clinker at the top
stop,
and
Jerry.
bottom.
Not sure I can even pronounce his last name. Jerry. So that's a video, 2.5 million views. Hawaiian lava flows. The title of that one. We're going to get back to craters of the moon, but there's also tree molds. Let me give you a sense of tree molds. Crack the mysteries of the earth. Discover the energy that drives a planet and explore the secret world below. With me, Nick, on the rocks. The south flank of Mount St. Helens, an amazing symmetry to a cone volcano. But 2,000 years ago, a vent opened up and a rare basaltic lava poured out. 2,000 years ago, interesting. There's plenty of mystery left in geology. Like, why did this ropey fluid basalt come out of Mount St. Helens? Nobody has an answer for that. These ropey, Pahoehoe-like structures are more reminiscent of Hawaii than the high Cascades. Regardless, this basalt is a happy accident because in the basalt is the famous Ape Cave, an evacuated lava tube that you can take your family through on foot. Okay, we go on to talk about Ape Cave, but I want to show you a lava, a tree mold. As the 2,000-year-old lava advanced through the forest, the lava hardened and formed a rocky seal around each tree trunk. The well-like holes left behind are as deep as the lava flow and preserve the diameter of the trees. Hey, this is a tight fit. I'm a big boy, and even I can fit into the crawl, as it's known here. I know it looks like a cave. This is not. This is a tree mold. 3 feet across, 50 feet long. This is the size of the tree that was laying in the forest. Lava comes in, encrusts around the tree burns up, the mold is left. Old growth trees in the crawl. Instead of a tree mold, Ape Cave is a 2-mile-long lava tube. Okay, tree molds. I got a bunch of short things. Here's a little look at one animation for basin and range. I was trying to show you with the cereal boxes. Wind's picking up, but we don't care. We're nice and cozy in here.
Process called rifting.
Jenda Johnson.
The crust also swelled upward thousands
No,
of
sorry,
feet,
this is not.
creating a blister-like dome with some of the thinnest crust on Earth.
Whoa, a little bit much there.
Over time, the east-west stretching cracked the dome, producing north-south trending faults.
I like this. A bit catastrophic for my taste, but half-graben, right?
Upthrust edges became mountain ranges, and downward edges became valleys.
Beautiful.
The Great Basin landscape was transformed into a distinctive pattern. Basin, range. Basin, range. Basin, range.
Good. That's in Nevada, Basin and Range National Park. Sorry, Great Basin
The angles
National
of
Park.
emergence shape the mountains with two distinct slopes, a steep slope and a softer slope. The west side of the Snake Range rises steeply from Spring Valley, while the east side, viewable from
Half-graben. Wish I had that video to watch before I went on that field trip. Here's Jenda Johnson. Less than a minute. Another way to describe basin and range. And why aren't you just showing stuff from craters of the moon? What are you doing? I hope you understand. There's elements that we can learn better in other places and then apply them to that very special craters of the moon. We're going to finish with a couple craters of the moon sections, so don't give up on me yet.
Province is a broad region of parallel north-south oriented valleys,
Jenda.
known as basins, and surrounding mountain ranges. The province was created as this area of the North American plate was stretched, fractured, and broken into hundreds of mountain blocks.
Good.
Let's watch a hypothetical block undergo early rifting. Both sides of the area under tension pull apart evenly. Hot material from the asthenosphere migrates upward, causing the land surface to rise and break along fault lines
Excellent.
into basins and ranges. Heat from the asthenosphere warms the upper mantle and lower crust, facilitating ductile deformation, thus allowing this lower part of the plate to stretch and pull thinner like taffy. The buoyancy of the warm material, in concert with the thinning of the plate, contribute to continued upward movement,
Very good.
creating fault-bound valleys and up-faulted mountain ranges. This is considered by some to represent early onset of rifting.
Yeah. Yeah, if that basin range extension continues, there will be a major rift, like an East African rift, developing in that portion of North America. Now, I introduced you, or some of you, probably many of you knew about him already, Martin Reitz, and he's got a little clip of Stromboli volcano in 2014, filmed with a DSLR camera. Nobody beats this guy as far as actual eruption footage. Now we're thinking of spatter cones. What we saw in the Galapagos, we saw a few still photos. Again, with these active captures by video, I want you just to visualize, pretend you're in craters of the moon 3,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. You're sitting there watching this in today's crater of the moon with audio. You're eating some Skittles. Yes. That's real time. That's not slow-mo. Spatter. Oh, yeah. Oh, come on. Woo! Notice he heard it a couple seconds after he saw it. Look at the size of that spatter rolling down those slopes. Yeah. I shared the details of his YouTube channel yesterday. Okay, the last two clips I have for you are from Craters of the Moon. Yeah, it's some RV people again. This is an older couple, and I'm very impressed with how they did this. I hope you are too. Might give you a decent feel for what the experience is like if you're thinking about going to Craters of the Moon National Monument. We'll do maybe 3 minutes of this. We won't watch the whole 5-minute clip.
The RV Safari series across Idaho. Today, we are taking you to the Craters of the Moon National Monument. We are starting our tour inside the Indian Tunnel, which is the biggest lava tube I've ever been in, and it's for Ria's sake. She's claustrophobic. It's got skylights all the way through it.
Yeah, it's no big deal because you can see light at the end of the tunnel, literally.
Yeah. So this is only the tip of the subterranean cavern here. Let's find out a little bit more about the park.
Craters of the Moon is a basaltic lava field that was established as a national monument in 1924 to protect and preserve this volcanic landscape. We have lava flows here that range from about 15,000 years old to most recent, about 2,000 years old. The size of the monument and preserve today is just over 750,000 acres, which is probably hard to relate to for most people, but that's about the size of Rhode Island.
A lot of people come here saying that it's just a pile of black rock.
Yeah, Luciana.
But there's actually a lot of really interesting vegetation and diversity that you'll be seeing on our park. You'll see some really well-preserved sagebrush steppe, as well as some really awesome rocky lava formations ranging from ropey, smooth pahoehoe to really rough-looking lava. We have a lot of cool cinder cones and lava tube caves to explore on trails and things like that.
You know, I'm going to be honest. I was firmly in the it's just a pile of black rock camp when we arrived. I couldn't imagine you could find anything interesting at Craters of the Moon. But I was proven way wrong, almost immediately. From the moment you arrive, you actually feel like you've been transported to another world.
Well, basically, how all of this lava got here is about 16 million years ago, a volcanic hotspot started moving east below the crust of the Earth, erupting from time to time and smoothing out what we know today as the Snake River Valley.
Kinda.
Literally, this hotspot melted a flat swath across the Rockies and is currently what fuels Yellowstone National Park's geologic activity.
But not all the history here is prehistoric. During the space race of the 60s and the early 70s, Craters of the Moon actually became a real-life astronaut research facility.
Apollo 14 did come to Craters of the Moon to learn more about basalt volcanoes and get an idea of how the landscape at Craters of the Moon could be similar to that of the actual moon.
Well, we decided to follow in the footsteps of NASA and do a little exploring, which was eye-opening to say the least.
We stopped first at the Spatter Cones, which are remnants of miniature volcanoes formed where large blobs of lava were spit into the air during an eruption a mere 2,000 years ago. Hiking trails took us through the landscape and into the cones themselves, where you could look down on glacial ice that is a permanent fixture of these deep holes, even through the hottest summer months.
You know, Craters of the Moon really is a hiker's dream, and that's particularly true for the kids. Once we made our way down into the Indian Tunnel, it was free rein for climbing and exploring, of which they took full advantage. Now, some of the areas are open for cross-country excursions, while others are not. So you'll want to be familiar with where you're going so you don't get off the trail in dangerous spots. Stay on the paths unless posted otherwise.
And while
One more. A nice, soothing, scenic 3-minute program that looks like they may show it in their visitor center. Multiple seasons. Beautiful, beautiful shot. I think this is the one that had winter stuff in it. Is that a pocket gopher? What is... Yeah, nice. Oh yeah, break out the drone. All right. That's on the, there is a Craters of the Moon National Park Service YouTube channel. There's other things to look at there if you really want to do your homework. Okay. The wind is strong. Let's see how much of the chalkboard is still with us. And it's time for some live Q&A. Since I'm in this nice little enclosure, I'm going to pop out the live chat like a boss, right between the eyes. And my toes are cold, so I'm going to find something to slip on my feet. And we'll do a little live Q&A the best I can. Thank you for sticking with us. Like I woke up from a nap. I'll adjust my eyes. That was a long one. How long were we in there? 10 after 10? All right. I got to get something on my feet. Hang on. Okay. He scrolls back. He looks for some uppercase. He tries to answer some questions. Alan, what's the difference between a spatter cone and a cinder cone? I actually tried to Google that this morning and just get a nice simple definition, Alan. And the best I can do for you is the size of the particles being ejected from the cone. So they're both cones. The cinders, as we mentioned yesterday, are pretty uniformly this size. And in geology, you would not call these spatters. You wouldn't call those spatters. Spatters are, like I visualize, big kind of fist-sized blobs that are truly molten. It's like flying big scoops of margarine and then just flinging the margarine and get kind of a tail almost. You know, this is really not appropriate either, but it's more along the size of a spatter. And so what I'm a little bit unsure of is the conditions necessary. If we don't have a bunch of groundwater in either of those cone systems, why are we getting the Cinder sometimes and the Spatter other times, and I don't think you ever have a case where it's cinders and spatter both being ejected from the same cone. So it's kind of an apples and oranges thing as I understand it. But it's been a while since I've studied the details of those systems. That would be my best way to answer that question. Evelyn, age 8. Does the basin and range model change in Idaho where you studied because of the clockwise rotation? Thank you for doing these shows. Thank you for watching these shows, Evelyn. I didn't know anything about the clockwise rotation 35 years ago, Evelyn, and nobody did. So I don't even have my clockwise rotation board with me. The one person who is sick of it is happy about that. But we are, in a big sense, Evelyn, pulling California away from the Rocky Mountains. And you're right that all of these normal faults are because of pulling California away and then also California being sent north in that clockwise rotation. So you're asking, did the model change because of the clockwise rotation? No, I would say the model changed, Evelyn, because people actually started making detailed maps of these mountain ranges, including my former advisor, Dave Rogers, who was at Stanford and worked for Elizabeth Miller, and Elizabeth Miller would have PhD students every couple of years, and they'd go down to, and they'd have their own range. They'd have their own mountain range. Rogers mapped the Snake Range. Jeff Lee mapped something else, can't remember. And when those detailed maps came in, Evelyn, and they saw that there wasn't a normal fault on each side of each basin, then they realized that rough idea of basin and range from detailed mapping, that's how this works. You get more data, you get more observation, and you realize, well, this isn't exactly right for many of the basins and the ranges because of the actual geometries that were able to be mapped in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. Thank you, Evelyn. I love you. Is Craters of the Moon still volcanically active? No, Eric. It's been stone cold since 2,000 years ago. And so we've emphasized that there's very young lavas here, but not young meaning last Tuesday. So if you're kind of asking, will there be more eruptions in the future? It has to be yes. The answer has to be yes, whether it's Crater of the Moon or some of these other rifts. I mean, this extension continues. Some of our folks love earthquakes. And just since we've done these live streams, we've had an earthquake in Salt Lake area, one in Stanley Basin, north of Stanley Basin, central Idaho, a couple in Nevada. That's all part of this ongoing story. And that's why many of us don't go, oh my God, we had a magnitude 5.7. Like this is an ongoing thing, and it has been happening for 20 million years. So I can't predict for you the next time there'll be a little eruption of young lava, but it will happen at some point. That's not very satisfying, is it? It's just the way we view it. We may have missed it, but what is the source of this Craters of the Moon magmas? Yeah, I don't know if I said it as carefully as I could have. When you thin the crust, so the crust, so most of the continental crust in Chicago, Illinois, Sierra Nevada mountains in California, the Black Hills of South Dakota, the crust is this thick. It's thick. It's 70 kilometers thick or more in places. In this area and throughout the basin and range, it's half as thick. And right below the crust is the mantle. So the short answer is the mantle. The mantle material is getting to the surface because there's half as much crust to fight through. But that was the purpose of showing you these amazing hand-drawn diagrams, was to show you that it's a little bit more involved than that. Hang on, Patrick. Patrick, hang on. Patrick, please, would you hang on? I'm teasing you. I still can't find the one I want, but I have a bunch of these in my thesis, and there is kind of this mid-crustal reservoir that we didn't know what to do with 35 years ago, and I'm not sure people still know what to do with that mid-crustal reservoir. Now I need to find the image that I want. I showed it to you once before. Come on. So there's work to be done on the true source of those magmas here. So the answer I just gave was that the crust is thinner than it should be and the upper mantle is getting to the surface. That's true, but it's not just a quick elevator ride to the surface. I'm giving you actual depths now in kilometers. Geophysically and otherwise, it's quite confident 35 years ago, and still confident, I've noticed, that there's this upper crustal reservoir. So that is the source, but why is that there? And why is that mantle material hanging up and kind of hanging out in that section? Don't know. Thank you for the question. I don't have any footage of the Great Rift personally, and I did what I could to find some YouTube clips last night before I went to bed. Matt, we don't anticipate an eruption soon. There's no reason to anticipate that, and so it wouldn't be a surprise. It would be very exciting, actually, especially if everybody stayed safe, but very difficult to forecast the next activity at Craters of the Moon or any place in the Basin and Range. Actually, that's an interesting question to me. Does anybody know, is there a place in the Basin and Range, like way beyond this map, that has younger lavas than 2000? Actually, mono craters. So even there in Eastern California, south of Mono Lake, there's the Basin and Range normal fault. That's the major range bounding fault on the eastern side of the Sierras. How young is Mono craters? Isn't that like just a few hundred years old or 600 years old or something? It'd be interesting if you had an answer, somebody. Anything young? How old or how young is the volcanic material in Mono craters, and then is there anything younger than that in the Basin and Range? We'll do a few more here. Oh, it's 10:18. Reality -3. Why is the eastern Snake River Plain there? Did the supervolcanoes blast the ranges away? I tried to comment on that. It's not that these, according to my thesis and others, and I think it's still pretty good work, there was not a continuation of these ranges ever, but that these normal faults with the Halfgraben model and these normal faults with the Halfgraben model were developing as the Yellowstone hotspot was drifting through the chalkboard. So they were both developing at the same time. And you may have noticed from my thesis, there's been some subsidence or some dropping of the land. In other words, Yellowstone is a high plateau. What's the elevation of Yellowstone Park? 6,000 feet above sea level, something like that? And those that know southern Idaho know that it's a gentle but very impressive decrease in elevation all the way to Boise. It's almost like it's a big toboggan run. Not quite that steep, but you get my idea. That it's a gentle decline in elevation down the Snake River Plains axis, and that's because when you are a mantle plume, my hair is long enough now it can be a mantle plume. When you're a mantle plume, and then you put the North American plate on top of it, where my mantle plume is in touch with the continent, it's going to be domed up. You're going to thermally inflate the crust, and rivers are going to be draining away from you. But how can I do this for you? But if, as you continue to drift southern Idaho over the mantle plume, that bulge, that temporary high, is going to drift with the hot spot. And so you're going to thermally contract or sink the Snake River Plain after it has been moved off of the mantle plume. What was the question? I failed to mention this, but especially Menon Buttes, which is over here on another one of these rifts, many of these cones, it's so windy. I mean, it's windy here in Ellensburg, but it's so windy on the Snake River Plain, even 2,000, 3,000, 7,000 years ago, that if we have a cone, a cinder cone, let's say, and here's the summit, I'll make it bigger. I'm going to make a super huge, ridiculously large cinder cone, just so you can see it, okay? So if we have a cinder cone out on the Snake River Plain, and here's the summit crater like we saw yesterday with those summit craters that attractive couple was walking up. In the case of the cinder cones on the Snake River Plain, they're lopsided. I don't know about the crater actually, but the cinders are blown up into the sky and then they're blown downwind. So as opposed to the cinder cones here in the Northwest, that generally those were so beautiful and symmetrical, do you remember? Many of these are kind of teardropped, which kind of is a nice visual for imagining watching this thing, eating your popcorn, watching the red hot popcorn come out of the cone. I have been to Craters of the Moon. Oh, that's from Daniel, age 12. Yes, Daniel. When I lived here in Pocatello, we would take field trips. It felt like we were going all the time. Weekends, these professors are donating spending so much time with us in the field. That was just an amazing tradition there at that department. Now, I'm from Wisconsin. Great department, but we weren't going out in the field much at all. And if we did, it was just driving through the cornfields, you know? So can you imagine how different, Daniel, it was for me to live in the West for the first time and to take classes? And I'm like, oh, well, Saturday, I'm working so hard in school. At least Saturday I can, I don't know, go to Pizza Hut maybe and like go to the buffet. And it's like, you're not going to Pizza Hut. I was like, why not? What's wrong with Pizza Hut? There's nothing wrong with Pizza Hut. We're going out. Daniel, we're going out. We got the Suburbans. We're going to spend the Saturday up here. We're going to go to Arco Hills. We're going to go to so many of these features. And I'm just talking about the Snake River Plain. We're also looking at horn corals up in some of these ranges. We're going over to City of Rocks. Oh man, it was just it was a life changer. It was occasionally I think, Daniel, of what my path would have been if I hadn't gone here when I was 24 years old. So it was a perfect place and a perfect time for me. And it's where I met my wife as well. Tom, Menon Butte North, greater than the south side of the rim, appears to have some different rock. Almost looks like slick rock seen in Utah. What is that? I wish I knew, Tom. I'm sorry. I don't know those details. I remember a couple of field trips there, but I don't remember that. Dale's apologizing about his big mouth. What else is new? I love you, Dale. Thank you for being with us so regularly. You're still alive, huh? I didn't send that guy. He can't find your house, I guess. Jan, I'm sure there are Native American stories. As I've discussed when we've had Randy Lewis, which was one of the highlights of this series, Randy just introduced me to a whole world. And I just wasn't thinking about that world before. And so I want to do much more with Native American stories. And I'm sure there are rich oral traditions about Craters of the Moon eruptions and plenty of other things. But 35 years ago, it wasn't part of the curriculum, shall we put it that way? Cake batter, I like that, Sid. Margarine? Yeah, cake batter, I like it. Many of you want to know about the next eruption. I've said what I can say there. Evelyn's little brother, do you think any of your students will be geologists on the moon? Well, that would be cool, wouldn't it? To actually have a geologist on the moon? I hope so. 3 more questions and we're done. Trying to pick a couple that I haven't really commented on before. More people wanting to know about Native American stuff. Me too. Bill, are the lava beds in northeastern California part of the Basin and Range story? Good question. I really like that place, Lava Beds National Monument. There's some similarities and some differences. I think we did a little family trip there on the way to visit our friends in Chico one year. I remember just crawling in a bunch of those caves. There are some normal faults. I'm going to go with yes. I don't remember the details. We're maybe too far west in Northern California now that I think about it. So I don't know, but I'm going to guess that Lava Beds National Monument is right at an intersection between Basin and Range normal faults and some of the subduction activity in the Cascades. Papagino, did the moving hotspot melt the Pleistocene layers in the eastern Snake River Plain, causing reforming of its basin and range? Hotspot melt the Pleistocene layers. I wouldn't think of it that way. Whether we are, well, the normal faults here are a pathway. I mean, if you're molten material at a certain depth, and I'm going to be vague about that because there's lots of differences, but if you are molten material and you want to get to the surface, you're not going to just do your own work. You're not going to be a gopher just digging straight up. You're going to find a zone of weakness and you're going to take advantage of it. And that's why these normal faults are such important features with this story. So I wouldn't think of the hotspot melting things or weakening it, if that's what you were saying. And I also am saying that this volcanism is younger than 15,000-year-old lava coming out of the ground more than 14 million years after the hotspot was here. Maybe I didn't state that carefully enough. The hotspot was here 10 million years ago. The hotspot's here 4 million years ago. But just much younger than 1 million years ago, we have volcanism here. So it's very difficult to, you probably weren't doing that, but I wanted to emphasize that. One more. Similar questions? Similar questions? Love all the questions. I will enjoy reading these after the fact. Bruce, the Western Snake River Plain continues to be a bugger for me. And if people have figured out the Western Snake River Plain very well, it's unknown to me. And I would love to learn about that. So somebody can maybe email me some new work on the Western Snake River Plain. But as been mentioned before, this Snake River Plain over by Mountain Home, the chevron there, the travel mug, it changes direction and it goes northwest. Basically, when we drive home next week from visiting family in Pocatello, we're going to be heading southwest on the freeway. We get to Twin Falls, and then we start heading northwest all the way to Ellensburg. And the Snake River Plain, the Western Snake River Plain, trends northwest. I don't understand why. And everybody shrugged their shoulders 35 years ago, and I would love to be able to address that, because if you're on Google Maps, there's a big, it's a boomerang, It's not just this. The Eastern Snake River Plain is this, and it's well established, but the doink going that way, I don't get it. Okay, that's enough. I do want to sincerely thank you all, not only for joining us today, but joining us for many of these, and for some of you loyal folks, all 75 of these. We've been doing these 5 a week since St. Patrick's Day. Backyard, front porch, out in the field, up at school. There have been plenty of highlights that I will remember for a long time, and it's so wonderful that you were able to be along. As I've mentioned at the top of the show today, and a couple other things, the number of people who are now subscribed to this channel, that has continued to grow dramatically over the last few weeks and months. And so it would be a knucklehead move for me to just go, well, that's it. Thanks, everybody, and not do anything more with this channel. So we definitely will be doing more live streaming. I definitely will be posting more things on this YouTube channel. So if you're subscribed and you're regularly viewing YouTube stuff and you have a feed or whatever and notifications and all that kind of stuff, I'm so pleased that we have so many people interested in the geology here in Washington and some of the work that I might be doing in the future. But I can't give you specifics because I don't know the specifics. And I hope you understand, I want to stay loose for the short term. So sooner or later, there'll be some more stuff coming your way, live and otherwise. But I haven't given it much thought yet, and I don't want to commit to anything until I have a clear vision of what I want to do. So these 75 episodes will probably just kind of stay together as kind of a series, a stay at home, a pandemic kind of a series, a COVID-19 series, and something slightly different will be appearing at some point. So sooner or later. Before I sign off, I want to do one more thank you. Sent by Patrick and his mother. And what's inside of the box, you say? It's a book. And Patrick and Patrick's mother and so many of the loyal viewers have decided to contribute to this book. So I'd like to share the book with you quickly, and then we'll sign off. Memories. Copyright, trademark. Memories of the way we were. Got a picture. Oh, come on. Let's get to the good stuff. Let's get to the important people. There we go. Here's the important people. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Ma 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 ma. Ah 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 ah. Soon and very soon. Oh, then very soon. Oh, then very soon. Hallelujah, hallelujah, this is gonna be. I won't cry in there, down the phone. Oh, no, down there, down the down. Oh, no, down, 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 down. Hallelujah, hallelujah, and shout it down, down. Boom, 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 boom. A do 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 boom boom do 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 do. Do 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 boom 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 boom. A do 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 do. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, do, 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 boom, boom, ba-dum, do, do, boom, boom, do, 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 do. Oh, do, 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 boom, 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 boom. Soon and very soon we can call in a king. No, I'm gonna sing. I'm the tunnel thing. No, for tunnel thing. I'm the tunnel. Hallelujah, hallelujah. The tunnel thing. No, for tunnel. No, for tunnel thing. I'll go down the thing. No, very soon. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Hallelujah, hallelujah. How can I say? I love you. See you next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Thanks for the book. We will treasure it for a long time.